Good morning. Thank you all for being here today with us. I'll start by acknowledging, of course, today being September 11th and, a tragic time in our country 24 years ago. And unfortunately, as we stand here today, another tragic time in our country with the murder of Charlie Kirk yesterday. And for us here in North Carolina, coming on the heels of a tragedy on the Charlotte transit system recently with the murder of the Ukrainian refugee who was on the train that night. And so over the course of the past really couple of weeks, we at the General Assembly have been thinking about what we can do to prevent the tragedy that happened in Charlotte from ever happening again in this state. And so we're still in the homework stage, finding out how this specific case happened. But from what we can tell so far, this was largely as a result of somebody being released from a jail who should not have been released from a jail. An individual who had a violent history, a convicted felon, had multiple charges, clearly had mental health issues, had multiple interactions with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, and somehow was allowed to walk out of the jail by a magistrate by simply signing a written promise to appear, again, when all those facts were known, or certainly should have been known at the time. And so we've got to get to the bottom of how it happened in this case, and we're looking at a number of possible legislative actions to take, reforming various issues with our magistrates, with pretrial conditions of release, which we'll talk about more in just a moment. But I'll also say again, it's a solemn day for us. Many of the folks who work in this building actually knew Charlie Kirk, and a lot of the folks who, a lot of staff members, frankly, actually literally worked for him in the past, knew him personally, and so calls. And what we saw in Utah is really something that should never happen in this country, and it's the same thing for the Charlotte murder. That's not the kind of thing that should happen in this country, and especially cannot happen in North Carolina. So I can tell you that we at the General Assembly, we're going to take all action that we need to prevent those things in the future. So I'm going to turn this over now to Chairman Whatley, and I'll come back up in a moment and answer some questions about our proposed legislation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we think about Charlie Kirk and his loss, which was yesterday, what comes to my mind was a quote from 2 Timothy 4:7. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith, and in Charlie's case, that was certainly true. And so, yes, this is a tough day because of what happened 24 years ago, because of what happened in North Carolina in the last several weeks, and because of what happened 24 hours ago in Utah. This is the kind of conversation that we should not have to have in this country or here in North Carolina. But having this tough conversation and speaking these hard truths is the perfect way to honor the legacy of someone like Charlie, so we will. Families are hurting right now because of this series of attacks. And as we speak these hard truths, we must be clear about the cause, the rhetoric and soft-on-crime policies of the left. Let's take the rhetoric first. President Trump was spot on about what leads to a culture like this one. When folks on the left seek to dehumanize those they disagree with, they use words like fascist and Nazi, and they call for violence. That's what leads to deranged people doing cowardly and evil acts. The most fundamental obligation and responsibility of any government is keeping its citizens safe. We need leaders at every level to acknowledge that there is a crime crisis here in North Carolina and across the country brought about by the left's soft-on-crime policies, which affect the safety of every community and every family across our great state. Roy Cooper has a history of being soft on crime. He let 3,500 criminals free. And the killer who killed young Iryna, he was released just 3 months after one of Cooper's soft on crime executive orders in 2020 and 13 additional times after he was arrested. DeCarlos Brown Jr. is a career criminal who was arrested 14 times when Cooper was governor and when he was our state's top law enforcement officer as Attorney General. What has transpired over these days and weeks is becoming a clear attack on our next generation. One high-profile victim and one making her own way in America, both killed in the prime of their lives because of the rhetoric, one because of soft crime on policies. The left loves to say the thoughts and prayers aren't enough. So let me call them to action. It's time for leaders in their party to call out the hateful rhetoric that is leading to this violence. And it is time for them to take a look in the mirror and realize their soft on crime policies are killing our young people, our future, and destroying families. Our elected officials must rescind the Cooper policies which allowed attacks like that on Iryna and ensure that this and any criminal feels the wrath of justice and is not allowed to walk the streets free again. I am here to offer my support to these men, to the legislative leadership who is committing to do that today. I'm here to encourage them. Don't back down. Don't relent. Don't be deterred by the hate. It's time to take our country back and dismantle the radical left machine which puts us in this position. And it's time to do it today. That's how we will honor the memory of these young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman Whatley. Iryna Zarutska should still be alive today. But her life was tragically cut short because of the atrocious policies pushed by out-of-touch politicians and court officials that prioritize a perverted vision or version of equity and politicized social justice over real and tangible justice. The hardworking men and women in law enforcement go after and catch violent criminals, but all too often, as soon as the criminals are brought before a magistrate or a judge, their efforts to keep our communities safe go down the drain. We cannot stand by while our cities are held hostage by soft-on-crime policies. We must stop the ongoing violence from overtaking our state and our country. Yesterday's assassination of Charlie Kirk is the latest in a string of political violence that also calls us to act. Last year, there were horrific assassination attempts carried out on President Trump. Earlier this summer, there was an assassination of former Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, and the shooting of Minnesota Senator John Hoffman and his wife. We must take crime and violence seriously, and our law and legal processes must reflect that seriousness. That means we will fight back against soft-on-crime policies that permeate our judicial system. When the General Assembly returns on September the 22nd, we're going to propose a package of common sense policies to more effectively tackle crime in our state. We can start by ensuring that Governor Stein and other members of the executive branch cannot establish any future task forces like the one Roy Cooper created that advanced weak-on-crime policies that kept Iryna's murderer on the streets. We cannot keep our citizens safe if our policies favor criminals over public safety. I personally am looking into ways to restart the death penalty here in North Carolina. For far too long, there's been a judicially imposed moratorium on the death penalty by activist judges and doctors and attorneys general and governors who are more interested in serving leftist political bosses than justice for victims and their families, and justice for the public as well. Republicans in the General Assembly have attempted to restart the death penalty over the past decade and a half, but those efforts have been stymied at every turn. Here's the thing. Policing doesn't need to be reimagined. It needs to be respected. It needs to be funded. Our hard-working law enforcement officers are all too often villainized just for doing their jobs, keeping us safe. It's time for that to end. If we do not respect those who keep us safe and run towards danger, then we will descend into chaos. Now is not the time to sit back and hope for the best. We need to take bold, decisive action. President Trump's vision to create a safer America is something we can replicate here in North Carolina. I support the President's actions to keep American citizens safe and commend his leadership in that regard. We need to lock up violent thugs who are terrorizing our citizens. We need to go after drug traffickers who are poisoning our children. We need to keep repeat offenders in jail. We need to end cashless bond. We need to hold, or cashless bail. We need to hold activist judges and magistrates accountable. We must deliver justice for Iryna and the countless families across our state that have fallen victim to a justice system that does not support them and does not keep them safe. And the bill we will bring forward later this month will play a vital role in that, but it's just a first step. Even though it's Speaker Hall and me here at the podium today, we've been working with our judiciary chairs. I want to call out specifically Senator Overcash and other members of our caucuses, and of course our House colleagues, to determine specifics for this package in order to address the very real issue of violence occurring in our state. And now I'll turn it over to Speaker Hall. Excuse me.
And I'll also touch on a few of the specifics that we're looking at as well, along with, as Senator Berger mentioned, ending cashless bail in this state. You know, what happened in this situation was an individual who could have been given a secured bond, meaning they would have had to have paid some amount of money in order, or get a bond to get out of jail. And this person, instead of being required to do that, was allowed to sign a piece of paper and walk out of that jail. And again, we're talking about an individual who had a prior violent felony conviction, who had served time in prison, who had been charged at least 13 times before that latest charge when he was allowed to walk out, an individual who obviously had some form of mental health issues, again, allowed to walk out of that jail. So when folks come in and before a magistrate and they've been charged with a serious crime, if they're if they have a prior violent felony on their record, it simply should not even be an option to allow that person to have some sort of cashless bail. They should be held in the jail under a secured bond, and if that had happened here, then most likely the victim in Charlotte would still be alive today. We've also got to look at the way that we handle magistrates in this state. You know, Charlotte has had a problem, Mecklenburg County has had a problem with its magistrates for a long time now. And I'll remind most of you all that we had a bipartisan bill that I worked on personally dealing with pretrial integrity, called it the Pretrial Integrity Act. And it basically said if you're out already on you've got a charge already and you're out on bail and you get charged again, we're going to make it much more difficult for you to get out pretrial. And, you know, we worked with the Mecklenburg County DA, we worked with city leaders in Charlotte, worked with the chief of CMPD on that bill, and they agreed with that. And we were able to get that bill done. But it obviously was not enough. And so when we have magistrates who are asleep at the wheel, like this one obviously was, we've got to make a change. And so we're going to be looking at some oversight of magistrates, looking at the way that we select magistrates, looking at ethical issues with magistrates, and making sure that the folks who are making these decisions are paying attention to what they're doing and that they're trying to serve the public safety and not some whatever left-wing interest or whatever other interest they have other than public safety. That's what a magistrate should be doing. So we're going to look very closely at that. We're also going to look at dealing with issues when folks are charged with crimes who have obvious mental health issues, making sure that magistrates are taking that into consideration. You know, in jails, we expanded Medicaid in this state, and one of the justifications for that, and we heard from sheriffs, was we have folks in the jails who need mental health care, or they need health care in general. And so we have options available under current law for these folks who are in jails to have some of that treatment. In fact, you know, we're told that CMPD apparently interacted with this guy 4 times in the prior year on well checks, and that he was offered services. It's not been clear what services this person was actually offered, We've not been given answers to those questions. We'll find out, and we'll get to the bottom of exactly what was going on there. But we're going to increase training for magistrates and make sure that they understand that their role, again, is to keep the public safe. The other thing that I think it's critical that we look into is the budget in Mecklenburg County and Charlotte, and to see where are they spending money at where they maybe shouldn't be. I've seen some reports about some grants that they receive from groups that their purpose is to keep people out of jail, or they're opposed to requiring cash bail. We're going to look at some of those grants and see if maybe that played a role in this case in Mecklenburg County. And again, we're going to go through the entire budget for the city of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County to see where these funds are going. Because ultimately, we're dealing with a local government, really Mecklenburg County and city of Charlotte, two local governments that, in my opinion, have lost institutional control of their areas. You have a sheriff in Mecklenburg County who refuses to cooperate with ICE. You have a sheriff in Mecklenburg County who I saw a report blamed the community for the heinous murder that happened in Mecklenburg County. He was not willing to take any of the blame whatsoever, and made very clear that was, in his opinion, the community's fault. You have, unfortunately, in CMPD, a refusal to give the officers body armor to wear while on duty, despite multiple officers being killed in recent years. And so we have to put a stop to the soft on crime policies. When you're dealing with violent offenders like Carlos Brown, if you don't take action, and the folks on the ground are the ones who have to take the action, if they don't do it, we're going to continue to have this sort of thing. You know, Mecklenburg County has over 100 murders a year now. And, you know, their crime rate may not be as bad as Chicago, but we don't want to compare ourselves to Chicago. In North Carolina, it simply should never be the case to have over 100 murders a year in a North Carolina city. And so we're going to do all we can at this level to make sure that the folks, not only in Mecklenburg County and Charlotte, but every county across the state, that they're doing all they can to keep the public safe. Because the thing that really keeps me up at night right now is to know, we know this individual story now because it's finally being publicized. But how many more folks like this are walking the streets right now in uptown Charlotte? How many of them are here in Raleigh or in Greensboro or Winston or any town across the state? How many others just like that are out walking around right now? And, you know, how do we know one of our loved ones is not going to come into the path of one of those individuals? So it's, again, a sad time here in this state in particular, with the things going on nationally and the things that we've seen after this Charlotte murder. But I can tell you, my colleagues in the General Assembly, both the House and the Senate, are committed to fixing the issue. In particular, Tricia Cotham, who, as a member of my caucus, who represents part of Mecklenburg County that sits very close to home for Representative Cotham, and she's dealt with a lot of threats to her personally after she changed parties. And so she knows well how important and critical it is that you have law enforcement officers who are focused on the safety of their community. And so she's working very closely with us on this and with the local partners there in Charlotte to get the issue fixed. So I think we'll open it up for questions now for folks, and just let us know who you want to ask to. Brian, go ahead.
First, my condolences on
All right, and again, that was both Michael Whatley, the Republican National Chairman Committee President, along with Senate President Phil Berger, and, as you just heard, Dustin Hall, the North Carolina House Speaker. Now, we do quickly want to highlight some of the breaking news we got during that press conference. The Salt Lake City office of the FBI has released several of these pictures of what they're calling the person of interest in the Charlie Kirk shooting. Now, they said on X, "We are asking for the public's help identifying this person of interest in connection with the fatal shooting of Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University. If you do know who this person is, please reach out to the FBI by calling 1-800-CALL-FBI. Again, you can find more on this on X, on the FBI Salt Lake City police page. Again, these are just the person of interest pictures of, again, the person they are saying has a connection to that fatal shooting of Charlie Kirk. Now, we will have more on this story coming up later on in the newscast, but for now, that's all we have time for today's new news and weather update. We'll be back with more coming up at the top of the hour.
This hour of the WITN First Alert Desk is sponsored by Supreme Choice.